He was supposed to meet his family for Thanksgiving dinner. Instead, he vanished into the most unforgiving desert in America. Rolin Bruno, 76 years old, experienced hiker, meticulous planner. He knew these mountains like the back of his weathered hands. But on November 27, 2019, his empty chair at the family table told a chilling story. His truck sat abandoned at the base of mountains that rise 2 vertical miles from the valley floor. No distress calls, no cries for help, just silence. And when the massive search began, helicopters, drones, ground teams, even military assets, they found absolutely nothing. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, not a single trace. This wasn't some weekend warrior who got in over his head. Bruno had completed the entire Pacific Coast Trail. He'd summited Mount Whitney. He was a retired director of Men's Rehab Victory Outreach, an author, a deacon at his church, a man who devoted his life to helping others navigate their darkest moments. But Death Valley? Death Valley had other plans. 5 years later, the mystery deepens. Because how does an experienced hiker simply vanish in a place where every grain of sand should tell a story? How does someone who knew the wilderness like Scripture disappear without leaving behind even the walking sticks he carried on every single hike? The answer lies somewhere in the silence of Hunter Canyon, in the shadows of the Inyo Mountains, in the secrets that Death Valley refuses to surrender. Before we dive into this baffling case, drop a comment and let me know. Are you watching this from your cozy living room, or are you out there in the wilderness yourself? And if you're new to Last Seen Stories, hit that subscribe button, because we're about to uncover a mystery that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about survival. This is the story of Rolin Bruno, a man who walked into the desert and became part of its eternal silence, a case that has stumped investigators, confounded search and rescue experts, and left a family without answers for over 5 years. What makes this disappearance particularly haunting is not just the complete absence of evidence, but the profile of the man who vanished. Bruno wasn't a novice hiker taking unnecessary risks. He wasn't unprepared or reckless. He was exactly the kind of person who should have been able to handle whatever Death Valley threw at him. Yet somewhere in the vast expanse of Hunter Canyon, between his last known location and his intended destination, Rolin Bruno stepped into a mystery that has refused to reveal its secrets. A mystery that challenges everything we think we know about survival, preparation, and the limits of human understanding when faced with nature's most extreme environments. To understand how impossible this disappearance really is, you need to understand who Rolin Bruno was. This wasn't just any 76-year-old man taking a casual stroll through the desert. Bruno lived in Arrowbear, California, a small mountain community nestled in the San Bernardino Mountains, where neighbors knew each other's hiking schedules and respected each other's wilderness wisdom. For decades, he'd been the guy people turned to for advice about backcountry routes and survival techniques. In a community where outdoor expertise was valued and respected, Bruno stood out as someone who had truly mastered the art of wilderness exploration. His resume read like an outdoor enthusiast's dream. The entire Pacific Coast Trail, completed. Mount Whitney, California's highest peak at 14,505 feet, summited. Countless solo treks through some of the most challenging terrain in the American West. But Bruno didn't just hike. He had mastered the art of wilderness navigation, survival, and risk management through decades of careful experience. Standing 5 feet 11 inches and weighing 170 pounds, Bruno carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd tested himself against nature and consistently emerged victorious. His long gray hair and matching beard weren't just stylistic choices. They were badges of honor from a lifetime spent under the open sky, weathered by sun, wind, and the elements that had shaped his character as much as his appearance. Those who knew Bruno described a man who was methodical, prepared, and deeply respectful of the wilderness. He understood that nature was not something to be conquered, but something to be respected, studied, and approached with the proper balance of confidence and humility. This philosophical approach to outdoor adventure had kept him safe through decades of increasingly challenging expeditions. But Bruno's expertise extended far beyond the physical challenges of wilderness exploration. As a retired director of Men's Rehab Victory Outreach in downtown Los Angeles, he'd spent years helping people navigate their way out of addiction and despair. His work required the same qualities that made him an exceptional hiker: patience, planning, the ability to assess dangerous situations, and the wisdom to know when to push forward and when to retreat. Bruno was also a deacon at Christ Church, where his reputation as a Bible scholar complemented his outdoor expertise. He was an author of a 4-book series called John and the Jesus Boat, works that explored themes of faith, perseverance, and finding meaning in life's most challenging circumstances. His writing revealed a man who thought deeply about the relationship between spiritual and physical challenges, someone who saw wilderness exploration as both adventure and spiritual practice. This was a man who understood both the spiritual and practical aspects of survival. His approach to hiking wasn't just about physical preparation. It was about mental preparation, spiritual grounding, and the kind of comprehensive planning that accounted for both known and unknown variables. Every Thanksgiving, Bruno proved his commitment to both family and wilderness by maintaining a tradition that had become the cornerstone of his family's holiday celebrations. For years, he and his family had gathered at Saline Valley Hot Springs, a remote desert oasis tucked deep within Death Valley National Park. This wasn't just a vacation spot. It was a pilgrimage that represented everything Bruno valued about the intersection of family, tradition, and wilderness experience. The hot springs represented everything Bruno loved about the wilderness: remote enough to filter out casual tourists who weren't serious about desert exploration, beautiful enough to remind visitors why they'd driven hours into the middle of nowhere, and challenging enough to require the kind of preparation and respect that Bruno had built his reputation on. Family members described these gatherings as sacred events that went far beyond typical holiday celebrations. Bruno would arrive early, scout the area for potential hazards, help set up camp, and regale everyone with stories from his latest adventures. He was the anchor of these gatherings, the one who made sure everyone felt safe, included, and properly connected to the natural world around them. But Bruno's relationship with the desert went deeper than family traditions or recreational hiking. He understood Death Valley's moods, its seasonal dangers, its hidden beauty, and its potential for sudden, life-threatening changes. He knew that Death Valley wasn't just a poetic name, it was a literal warning about a landscape that had claimed lives before and would claim lives again. That understanding informed every aspect of his approach to wilderness exploration. He wasn't reckless or impulsive. Every trip was planned with the precision of a military operation: water caching for future hikes, route planning with multiple contingencies, emergency protocols that accounted for everything from equipment failure to sudden weather changes to medical emergencies. Those weathered hands had guided him through countless successful expeditions. They'd set up camp in sub-zero temperatures, navigated by compass when GPS failed, and performed the 1,000 small tasks that separate experienced hikers from statistics. They'd tied knots that held in fierce winds, prepared meals that provided proper nutrition in extreme conditions, and handled navigation equipment that kept him oriented in landscapes where getting lost could mean death. When Bruno prepared for a trip, everything had a purpose, everything had a backup, everything was tested, double-checked, and positioned for maximum efficiency. This wasn't hobby-level preparation. This was the systematic approach of someone who understood that, in the wilderness, small mistakes can have fatal consequences. His vehicle was always loaded with carefully organized gear, multiple water sources, emergency food supplies, first aid equipment, communication devices, navigation tools, and the specialized equipment needed for whatever specific challenges his planned route might present. He carried maps, compass, GPS devices, and the knowledge to use all of them effectively even when technology failed. But experience means nothing when Death Valley decides to keep its secrets. And in November 2019, the desert was preparing to demonstrate just how little human preparation can matter when nature decides to play by different rules. November 2019. The desert was entering its most deceptive and dangerous season, the time when Death Valley's brutal summer heat gives way to conditions that seem more manageable but can prove equally deadly in entirely different ways. Bruno's mission was straightforward and practical: hike into Hunter Canyon, part of the expansive and challenging Saline Valley region, and cache water for a spring expedition he was planning. This wasn't recreational hiking. This was reconnaissance and preparation, the kind of methodical advance work that had enabled his successful wilderness adventures for decades. Hunter Canyon wasn't a casual hiking destination that appeared on tourist maps or attracted weekend adventurers. Nestled within the Inyo Mountains, it represented some of the most challenging and unforgiving terrain in Death Valley National Park. The canyon walls rose sharply from the desert floor, creating a landscape of hidden passages, unexpected vertical climbs, and distances that could be deceptive even to experienced hikers. The terrain demanded respect and expertise: loose rock formations that could shift without warning, hidden crevices that could trap unwary hikers, elevation changes that could exhaust even well-conditioned adventurers, weather patterns that could change rapidly and dramatically. This was wilderness in its most raw and challenging form, the kind of environment that separated experienced hikers from those who merely thought they were prepared. Sometime between November 25th and 26th, Bruno made the drive from his home in Arrow Bear to Death Valley. The journey itself was part of his preparation ritual, a gradual transition from the familiar mountain environment of his home to the alien landscape of the desert. His truck was loaded with the usual essentials: multiple water containers, emergency food supplies, navigation equipment, first aid materials, and the walking sticks that had become his signature accessory on every hike. The Inyo Mountains towered nearly 2 vertical miles above the valley floor, a stark and constant reminder of the massive scale Bruno was dealing with. These weren't gentle hills or well-marked trails designed for casual recreation. This was wilderness that demanded technical skill, physical conditioning, and the kind of mental preparation that came from years of experience in extreme environments. Bruno's preparation routine never varied, regardless of the specific destination or duration of his planned hike. Check weather forecasts not just for the immediate area, but for the broader region that could affect local conditions. Plot primary routes and backup alternatives. Confirm water sources, and calculate consumption rates with generous margins for error. Estimate travel times that accounted for terrain difficulty and potential obstacles. Leave detailed plans with family members who understood both his capabilities and the inherent risks he faced. Meanwhile, his family was already at Saline Valley Hot Springs preparing for their annual Thanksgiving gathering. They'd driven out early, established their traditional campsite, and were eagerly awaiting Bruno's arrival on November 27th. The family gathering represented more than just a holiday celebration. It was a continuation of traditions that had bound them together for years, a time when Bruno's wilderness expertise became part of the family's shared experience. The plan was elegantly simple in its familiarity. Bruno would complete his water caching mission in Hunter Canyon, then drive to Saline Valley Hot Springs to join his family for their traditional Thanksgiving celebration. It was the kind of plan he'd executed successfully dozens of times before, a perfect balance of practical wilderness preparation and family commitment that represented everything he valued about his lifestyle. Bruno's approach to this expedition followed the same meticulous pattern that had characterized his wilderness adventures for decades. He would have studied topographical maps, identified potential hazards, planned for equipment failures, and prepared for weather changes. His hiking experience had taught him that successful wilderness exploration required not just physical preparation, but comprehensive planning that accounted for every variable he could anticipate. But November 27th came and went without Bruno's arrival. No phone call, no message, no explanation for his absence. For a man whose reliability had become legendary among family and friends, this silence was immediately alarming. His family's concern was immediate and justified. Bruno wasn't the type to be late without explanation or communication. He wasn't the type to change plans without informing those who were expecting him. When Bruno said he'd be somewhere at a specific time, he was there. His absence from the family gathering wasn't just disappointing, it was a clear signal that something had gone wrong. The campground host received their report with the kind of professional concern that comes from years of dealing with Death Valley's inherent dangers. Missing hikers weren't uncommon in the harsh desert environment, but missing experienced hikers? That was different. That was serious. That was the kind of situation that required immediate action. The first breakthrough in the unfolding mystery came when searchers located Bruno's truck. It sat exactly where an experienced hiker would park for a Hunter Canyon expedition, at the base of the Inyo Mountains, positioned to provide access to the canyon while remaining accessible for his planned return. The vehicle showed no signs of struggle, no indication of mechanical problems, no evidence of anything unusual beyond the simple fact that its owner had not returned as planned. Inside the truck, investigators found evidence of Bruno's typical preparation. Detailed maps with route markings, navigation tools, emergency supplies, and the containers that had held his hiking provisions. But they also found significant evidence of what wasn't there: his walking sticks, his day pack, his water bottles, and all the gear he would have carried on his planned hike. The discovery of the empty truck marked the beginning of a mystery that would confound investigators and search teams for years to come. Because while Bruno was somewhere in Hunter Canyon, nature was preparing to unleash its most devastating and complicating weapon, a storm system that would transform an already challenging search into a nightmare of impossible conditions. November the 27th, 2019, Thanksgiving Day. The Bruno family gathered around their traditional meal at Saline Valley Hot Springs, but one chair remained conspicuously empty. The absence of their patriarch, normally the cornerstone of their holiday celebration, cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful reunion. As the afternoon stretched into evening, their concern evolved from mild worry to genuine alarm. Bruno's reliability was legendary among family members. He was the kind of person who arrived early rather than late, who communicated changes in plans well in advance, who understood that in wilderness environments, other people's concern about your safety was never just emotional, it was practical and potentially life-saving. The family's decision to report Bruno missing wasn't made lightly, but it was made quickly. They understood that in Death Valley, missing meant something completely different than it did in urban environments. In the desert, every hour that passed without contact increased the potential severity of whatever situation had developed. The campground host received their report with the gravity it deserved. When experienced hikers don't show up in Death Valley, you don't wait for morning to see if they'll wander back to camp on their own. You don't assume they've simply decided to extend their adventure without communication. You recognize that something has gone wrong, and you call for help immediately. But here's where the story takes its first deeply disturbing turn. According to Bruno's family, when National Park Service police arrived that evening, they allegedly did nothing initially. No immediate search activation, no coordinated response plan, no mobilization of the resources that should have been deployed immediately when an experienced hiker fails to return from a planned expedition in one of America's most dangerous wilderness areas. The delay in official response becomes even more troubling when you consider what was happening with the weather. While authorities were supposedly determining jurisdiction and protocols, Death Valley was preparing to unleash a storm system that would transform an already dangerous situation into a complete nightmare. November 28th brought the arrival of a massive winter storm system that would make Bruno's survival far more difficult and the search for him nearly impossible. Heavy fog rolled across the desert floor, reducing visibility to mere feet. Ice formed on mountain trails, making navigation treacherous for anyone caught in the open. Wind speeds reached dangerous levels, creating conditions that could disorient even experienced hikers. This wasn't just bad weather. This was the kind of storm that kills even experienced hikers who are properly prepared and equipped. Temperatures plummeted far below what Bruno would have expected when he planned his expedition. Wind speeds reached levels that could knock a person off their feet or make it impossible to maintain direction. The desert landscape, already challenging under normal conditions, became a death trap. The storm effectively eliminated any possibility of immediate rescue, even if Bruno had been able to signal for help. Helicopters couldn't fly in the fog and ice. Ground vehicles found roads impassable, particularly the treacherous South Pass route that provided access to the most likely search areas. Even if Bruno had been carrying emergency communication equipment, the storm conditions would have made rescue attempts impossible. For Bruno's family, the storm represented far more than just search delays. They understood the terrain. They knew the risks. They knew that every hour that passed in those conditions reduced the chances of finding their father alive. The storm wasn't just hampering the search. It was potentially killing the person they were trying to find. The psychological impact on the family was devastating. They were forced to sit in their campsite, watching conditions deteriorate, knowing that somewhere in that maelstrom, their father was facing the fight of his life. The helplessness of watching rescue efforts being delayed while conditions worsened added another layer of trauma to an already impossible situation. Think about this timeline carefully. Bruno disappeared on November 27th when weather conditions were still manageable. The storm hit on November 28th, making any rescue attempts impossible. For 2 critical days, the most important 48-hour period in any search and rescue operation, weather conditions made organized search efforts completely impossible. Those 48 hours represent the difference between rescue and recovery in wilderness survival situations. They represent the window when even injured or disoriented hikers can often be found alive. They represent the period when tracks haven't been obscured, when evidence hasn't been scattered by wind, when the chances of successful rescue are highest. The storm stole those crucial hours from Bruno and from the people trying to find him. When weather conditions finally improved enough to launch a proper search, valuable time had been lost. The storm had covered tracks, displaced potential evidence, and created entirely new hazards throughout the search area. But the storm's impact went beyond just delaying rescue efforts. It fundamentally changed the landscape that Bruno was trying to navigate. Familiar landmarks became obscured, established routes became impassable. The desert that he knew so well had become an alien environment where his decades of experience might not be enough to ensure survival. The official search finally began with the kind of multi-agency response that should have been implemented immediately when Bruno was first reported missing. Inyo County Search and Rescue, California Highway Patrol, Kern County teams, China Lake Mountain Rescue, and multiple other agencies converged on the area with the resources and expertise needed for a comprehensive search operation. But they were fighting an uphill battle against time and conditions. The storm hadn't just delayed the search, it had fundamentally changed the environment they were searching. New snow covered potential clues. Ice made previously accessible areas dangerous or impossible to reach. The desert landscape, already challenging under normal conditions, had become even more treacherous and unpredictable. Search dogs, typically invaluable in missing person cases, found their abilities severely compromised by the storm's impact. Scent trails that might have led directly to Bruno had been disrupted by wind, snow, and dramatically changing atmospheric conditions. The tools that search teams relied on most heavily had been rendered less effective by the same weather that had made Bruno's survival more difficult. The search zone encompassed hundreds of square miles of some of the most challenging terrain in North America, hidden canyons where a person could be completely invisible from above, vertical rock faces that could conceal evidence indefinitely, abandoned mines that could trap unwary explorers, remote valleys where rescue teams might never think to look. And this is where nature decided to play the cruelest trick of all. The storm that was supposed to last 48 hours kept coming and coming and coming. Each additional day of severe weather made Bruno's survival less likely and the search more difficult. When the weather finally broke enough to allow organized search efforts, what emerged was one of the most extensive and technologically sophisticated search operations in Death Valley's recorded history. This wasn't just a local effort involving a few volunteer searchers. This was a coordinated deployment of resources from multiple counties, state agencies, and even military installations. Inyo County Search and Rescue took the operational lead, bringing decades of experience with Death Valley's unique challenges. But they weren't operating alone. California Highway Patrol contributed their aerial capabilities and coordination expertise. Kern County provided additional ground teams familiar with desert conditions. China Lake Mountain Rescue brought specialized technical rescue capabilities. San Bernardino County sent resources and personnel. Even Fallon County from Nevada crossed state lines to join the effort. The scale of the response reflected both the seriousness of the situation and the respect that Bruno's reputation commanded throughout the search and rescue community. This wasn't just another missing hiker case. This was an experienced wilderness expert who had vanished under circumstances that defied easy explanation. The aerial component of the search was particularly impressive. Multiple helicopters from different agencies crisscrossed the search area in carefully coordinated patterns designed to maximize coverage while minimizing duplication of effort. These weren't casual flyovers. These were systematic searches where every square mile of terrain was examined by trained observers using advanced optical equipment. The helicopter crews weren't just looking for Bruno himself. They were searching for any sign of human presence in the vast wilderness, reflection from metal equipment, unusual color patterns that might indicate clothing or gear, movement that didn't match the natural patterns of desert wildlife, or any other anomaly that might provide a clue to his location. Advanced drone technology was deployed to access areas too dangerous or difficult for helicopter operations. These weren't simple recreational drones. These were sophisticated platforms equipped with thermal imaging cameras, high-resolution visual systems, and extended flight capabilities that allowed them to search areas that would be impossible to reach by ground teams. The thermal imaging technology revealed the complex heat signature patterns of the desert environment. The sun-heated rocks, underground hot springs, and desert wildlife created a constantly changing thermal landscape. Search teams had to learn to distinguish between these natural heat sources and the kind of thermal signature that might indicate human presence. But the thermal searches consistently came up empty. No heat signatures that suggested a living person. No residual heat that might indicate recent human activity. No thermal anomalies that couldn't be explained by natural desert phenomena. Ground teams worked in carefully planned grid patterns, covering terrain that would challenge even experienced hikers. These weren't casual volunteers. These were trained search and rescue professionals who understood both the technical aspects of wilderness searching and the psychological demands of searching for someone who might no longer be alive. Each ground team carried heavy packs loaded with emergency medical supplies, communication equipment, and rescue gear. They were prepared not just to find Bruno, but to provide immediate medical care if he was found injured, and to execute a technical rescue if he was found in a location that required specialized equipment to reach. The search dogs deployed with their handlers represented some of the most skilled canine search teams in the region. These dogs were trained specifically for desert conditions, with experience in tracking human scent through environments where heat, wind, and terrain can quickly disperse scent trails. But the dogs consistently encountered the same frustrating problem, trails that started promisingly but then simply ended. They would pick up scent patterns that seemed to indicate Bruno's passage, follow them for varying distances, and then lose the trail completely. It was as if Bruno had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace that even highly trained search dogs could follow. Search teams systematically examined every abandoned mining structure throughout the search area. Death Valley is riddled with old mines, some dating back to the gold rush era, others from more recent mining operations. These dark, dangerous spaces represented potential shelter for someone caught in a storm, but they also represented potential death traps for anyone who might have fallen into unmarked shafts or become trapped in unstable structures. Each mine search was conducted with extreme caution. The structures were often unstable, with rotting timbers, loose rock, and hidden hazards that could injure searchers. Some mines contained toxic gases or oxygen-depleted air that could be deadly. Others had been flooded or contained equipment that could cause injury, but every accessible mine in the search area was examined thoroughly. Technical rescue teams deployed specialized equipment to access areas that normal hiking couldn't reach. They used rope systems to descend into hidden valleys, climbing gear to search vertical cliff faces, and technical expertise to navigate terrain that had claimed lives in previous incidents. The level of technical expertise involved in the search was remarkable. Teams included experienced rock climbers, rope rescue specialists, wilderness medical technicians, and communications experts. They had access to equipment that could handle almost any rescue scenario that Death Valley might present. Communication between search teams was constant and professionally coordinated. Every few minutes, radio check-ins reported progress, shared information about areas searched, and coordinated movements to ensure that the search effort was systematic and comprehensive. The level of organization was impressive, a testament to the seriousness with which all involved agencies approached the operation. Search area maps showed the enormous territory being covered, hundreds of square miles of desert terrain that ranged from relatively flat valley floors to vertical mountain faces. Each grid square on the search maps represented hours of methodical searching by trained professionals who understood that overlooking even small areas could mean the difference between finding Bruno and leaving his fate forever unknown. Helicopter pilots faced unique challenges in the Death Valley environment. Extreme temperature variations affected aircraft performance and created dangerous flight conditions. Turbulence from heated air masses made low-level flying hazardous. The vast scale of the terrain made it easy to miss small details that might be crucial to the search. Ground teams dealt with the same extreme conditions that might have affected Bruno's survival. Scorching heat during the day that could cause dehydration and heat exhaustion. Freezing temperatures at night that could lead to hypothermia. Dehydration that could incapacitate searchers as quickly as it might have affected the person they were looking for. The search drew support from beyond official agencies. Volunteers from the hiking community offered their knowledge of local terrain. Family members provided insights into Bruno's habits and preferences. Local residents who understood the unique challenges of Death Valley offered guidance and support. Modern technology was leveraged to its fullest extent. GPS tracking systems monitored search team movements to ensure comprehensive coverage. Satellite imagery provided detailed topographical information. Advanced communication systems kept teams connected across vast distances. Day after day, the pattern repeated with demoralizing consistency. Teams deployed at dawn, worked through brutal conditions, and returned at dusk with no new evidence. The psychological toll on searchers was evident. Trained professionals who were accustomed to successful rescues found themselves confronting the possibility that this case might be different. By December 10, 2019, the harsh reality became unavoidable. Despite the massive deployment of resources, technology, and expertise, the search had yielded absolutely nothing. Not Bruno's body, not his equipment, not even a single piece of evidence suggesting where he might have gone or what might have happened to him. The official transition to limited continuous search mode was announced with bureaucratic language that couldn't disguise the underlying reality. The active search was being scaled back. The massive deployment of resources was ending. The case was transitioning from active rescue to passive investigation. The numbers were staggering and sobering. Hundreds of square miles searched by air and ground. Dozens of trained personnel involved. Countless flight hours in dangerous conditions. Thousands of man-hours on the ground in extreme terrain. Advanced technology deployed at considerable expense. And the result? Nothing. But here's what makes this case truly unsettling and unique in the annals of Death Valley disappearances. In all of the desert's recorded history, with all of its documented disappearances and tragic accidents, missing people leave traces. Equipment scattered by wind, clothing caught on rocks, bones bleached by sun and preserved by the dry climate. Something, always something. Rolin Bruno left nothing at all, and that complete absence of evidence would prove to be the most haunting aspect of a case that continues to baffle investigators and searchers 5 years later. So how does a 76-year-old man vanish without a trace in one of the most extensively searched environments on Earth? The theories that emerged as investigators and experts tried to make sense of the impossible reveal as much about the limitations of human understanding as they do about the potential fate of Rolin Bruno. Theory 1. The fatal fall. The most logical and statistically probable explanation centered on an accidental fall. Hunter Canyon's terrain includes numerous cliff faces, loose rock formations, and hidden crevices, where a single misstep could result in a fall into a location that would be invisible from above. Death Valley's complex topography contains countless locations where a body could remain hidden indefinitely. Deep ravines carved by ancient flash floods, rock formations that create natural burial sites, caves and overhangs that provide complete concealment from aerial observation, underground caverns accessible only through unmarked entrances that could easily be missed by even the most thorough search. The fall theory gains credibility when you consider the terrain Bruno was navigating. Hunter Canyon includes areas where solid-looking rock might be unstable, where seemingly safe paths might end in sudden drop-offs, where weather conditions could make normally manageable terrain treacherous. But here's what doesn't add up about the fall theory. Bruno was an experienced hiker who had spent decades developing terrain assessment skill. He understood how to read geological formations, how to test the stability of rock faces, how to identify potential hazards before they became deadly. He'd successfully navigated far more challenging locations throughout his hiking career. What could have caused such a catastrophic mistake? The storm conditions might have played a role, but Bruno disappeared before the worst weather arrived. Equipment failure could have contributed, but Bruno was known for carrying backup equipment and having multiple contingency plans. The fall theory also doesn't explain the complete absence of evidence. Even if Bruno had fallen into a hidden location, some trace of his passage should have been detectable. His walking sticks, which he carried on every hike, should have been found somewhere along his route. His day pack, water bottles, or other equipment should have been scattered by the impact or discovered by searchers. Theory 2. Medical emergency. At 76, Bruno was in excellent physical condition for his age, but age-related medical emergencies can strike without warning. Heart attack, stroke, sudden diabetic episode, seizure. Any of these could have incapacitated him in a location where he couldn't be easily found. A medical emergency in Death Valley's isolation would be essentially unsurvivable under the best conditions. No cell phone coverage, no passing hikers, no chance of rescue without someone knowing exactly where to look. Even if Bruno had been carrying emergency communication equipment, a sudden medical crisis might have prevented him from using it. The medical emergency theory gained some support from the fact that Bruno was hiking alone. Solo hikers who experience sudden medical problems have no backup, no one to call for help, no one to provide immediate assistance. What might be survivable with another person present becomes fatal when you're alone. But like the fall theory, the medical emergency explanation doesn't account for the complete absence of evidence. Even if Bruno had collapsed from a medical crisis, his body and equipment should have been discoverable by the extensive search efforts. The dry desert climate typically preserves organic material well, and searchers covered the areas where Bruno was most likely to have been hiking. Theory 3. Exposure and disorientation. The severe weather conditions that developed shortly after Bruno's disappearance could have played a role even before the storm fully arrived. Desert conditions can cause disorientation, particularly in older hikers. Dehydration, temperature fluctuations, and the vast scale of the landscape can affect judgment and navigation abilities. Disorientation in Death Valley can be fatal, even for experienced hikers. The landscape includes areas where all directions look similar, where landmarks can be obscured by weather or distance, where GPS equipment might fail or provide confusing readings. Getting lost in Death Valley doesn't just mean being inconvenienced, it means facing potential death from exposure. The weather conditions that developed on November 28th could have created a perfect storm of disorientation factors: rapidly changing temperatures, increasing wind, decreased visibility, and the psychological stress of being caught in deteriorating conditions could have affected Bruno's decision-making abilities. But this theory also has significant problems. Bruno knew the Death Valley area well. He'd been hiking in the region for years and had developed familiarity with the terrain, weather patterns, and potential hazards. The level of disorientation required to explain his disappearance would be extreme and completely uncharacteristic. Bruno was also known for his careful preparation and contingency planning. He carried multiple navigation tools, maintained detailed route plans, and had established procedures for dealing with emergency situations. It would have taken a catastrophic combination of factors to cause the kind of disorientation that might explain his disappearance. The investigation's challenges law enforcement faced unique and unprecedented obstacles in investigating Bruno's disappearance. The storm that hit immediately after he vanished had compromised potential evidence before investigators could examine the scene. The vast search area made comprehensive investigation nearly impossible with available resources. The complete absence of physical evidence made it difficult to focus investigative efforts on any particular theory or location. Investigators meticulously reconstructed Bruno's final days and planned route. They interviewed family members about his preparation routines, reviewed his known hiking patterns, and analyzed his experience level to understand what might have gone wrong. but every investigative lead eventually dead-ended in the same place: the desert's impenetrable silence. The investigation revealed something troubling about the initial response to Bruno's disappearance. For Bruno's family, the theories and investigations represent far more than academic exercises or intellectual puzzles. They represent a living nightmare that has persisted for over 5 years without resolution, without closure, and without the answers that might allow them to process their grief and move forward with their lives. The annual Thanksgiving tradition that once brought the family together in celebration now serves as a painful reminder of their loss: that empty chair at Saline Valley Hot Springs. The stories that Bruno will never tell, the hiking wisdom that he'll never share with grandchildren, the family gatherings that will forever be incomplete. In interviews with local media, Bruno's family members described a man who was meticulous about safety, communication, and preparation. They emphasized that his disappearance was completely out of character, a fact that makes the mystery more troubling rather than less so. Bruno wasn't the type to take unnecessary risks or to fail to communicate with people who were depending on him. The family's pain was compounded by their intimate knowledge of Bruno's capabilities and experience. They knew he was fully capable of handling the challenges that Death Valley might present. They knew he had survived far more dangerous situations successfully. They knew that whatever happened to him was something extraordinary and unprecedented. The initial response to Bruno's disappearance created additional trauma for the family. The delay in beginning organized search efforts, the jurisdictional confusion, and the lack of immediate coordination left them feeling abandoned during the most critical period of the emergency. They watched precious hours slip away, while authorities determined protocols and procedures. Family members became advocates for improved search and rescue protocols, arguing that the initial response to Bruno's disappearance revealed systemic problems that could affect other missing hikers. They pushed for better coordination between agencies, faster response times, and more comprehensive initial search efforts. The family's pain galvanized the outdoor community in ways that extended far beyond the immediate search efforts. Volunteers who had never met Bruno joined search efforts because they understood the universal bond between hikers and the shared risks that everyone faces in the wilderness. The hiking community rallied around the family with offers of support, volunteer search efforts, and fundraising for continued search activities. Local media coverage was extensive and sustained, particularly in regional outlets like the Pahrump Valley Times and other publications that served the outdoor community. The case attracted attention because it challenged fundamental assumptions about wilderness safety and the effectiveness of modern search techniques. Media reports highlighted both the massive scale of the search efforts and the overwhelming challenge posed by Death Valley's geography and climate. Detailed maps, weather analysis, and interviews with search and rescue personnel provided the public with insights into the complexity of the operation and the unique challenges it presented. The hiking community's response was particularly significant and sustained. Online forums buzzed with theories, advice, and expressions of support. Experienced hikers shared their own close calls in Death Valley, emphasizing how quickly conditions can turn deadly and how small mistakes can have fatal consequences. Social media became a platform for sharing memories of Bruno and maintaining public awareness of his case. Photos from his hiking adventures, stories about his character and impact on others, and tributes to his contributions to the outdoor community created a digital memorial that kept his story alive beyond the immediate search period. Regular memorial gatherings became a way for the family to maintain hope while processing their grief. These events drew participants from across the outdoor community, creating a network of support that transcended the immediate family and extended to everyone who had been touched by Bruno's story. The public response revealed how deeply the case resonated with people who understood the allure of wilderness adventure. Letters of support poured in from across the nation and internationally, along with offers of volunteer assistance and financial support for continued search efforts. For the family, the media attention served a dual purpose. It kept Bruno's case in the public consciousness, increasing the chances that someone might come forward with information that could lead to answers. But it also meant reliving their loss repeatedly, in public forums where speculation sometimes replaced sensitivity. The family's determination to find answers never wavered, even as official search efforts scaled back and public attention gradually shifted to other stories. They continued to advocate for renewed investigations, for the application of new technology, and for sustained public awareness of their father's case. Family members organized their own search efforts, returning to Death Valley repeatedly to explore areas that might have been missed or that became accessible with changing conditions. They developed expertise in search techniques, learned to use advanced equipment, and maintained relationships with search and rescue professionals who continued to support their efforts. The ongoing nature of their search efforts reflected both their refusal to give up hope and their need to feel that they were actively working toward resolution. The uncertainty was perhaps more difficult to bear than definitive bad news would have been. Not knowing Bruno's fate meant that grief couldn't be fully processed, that closure couldn't be achieved, and that hope and despair existed in constant tension. Media coverage increasingly focused on the broader implications of Bruno's disappearance for wilderness safety and search and rescue protocols. Safety experts used the case to discuss preparation requirements, communication protocols, and the inherent risks of solo hiking in extreme environments. The case became a reference point in discussions about the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility in wilderness recreation. Bruno's experience and preparation made his disappearance particularly troubling because it suggested that even perfect preparation might not be sufficient protection against Death Valley's dangers. International media attention brought the case to the attention of outdoor enthusiasts worldwide, creating a global community of people who followed developments and supported the family's continued search efforts. The case became a symbol of the mysteries that persist in wilderness areas despite technological advances and human determination. But the impact of Bruno's disappearance extends far beyond media coverage and public attention. It has fundamentally changed how the outdoor community thinks about wilderness safety, preparation, and the acceptance of risk. His story serves as both inspiration and warning, a reminder that the pursuit of wilderness adventure comes with inherent dangers that can't be completely eliminated by experience or preparation. 5 years later, Death Valley remains exactly as it was when Rolin Bruno walked into Hunter Canyon with his careful plans and decades of experience. The rocks haven't shifted to reveal hidden secrets. The desert hasn't surrendered its silence. The wind hasn't uncovered buried evidence. The mystery endures with the same intensity and frustrating completeness as the day he vanished. The case remains officially open, a testament to law enforcement's acknowledgement that some mysteries resist resolution despite the best efforts of investigators and advanced technology. But open doesn't mean active in the way that families of missing persons hope it will. It means waiting for new evidence, new technology, or the kind of random discovery that sometimes solves cases that have remained cold for years. Bruno's disappearance has influenced search and rescue protocols throughout the Death Valley region and beyond. Agencies have invested in enhanced drone surveillance systems with improved thermal imaging capabilities. They've developed better communication equipment designed specifically for extreme environment operations. They've refined coordination protocols to ensure faster response times and more comprehensive initial search efforts. The case has become a cornerstone of wilderness safety education throughout the American West. Hiking groups study Bruno's preparation methods, his experience level, and the circumstances of his disappearance to understand how even exemplary preparation can prove insufficient when conditions turn extreme. Educational programs now emphasize not just the importance of preparation, but the acceptance of irreducible risk that comes with wilderness exploration. Bruno's case serves as a powerful reminder that nature doesn't respect human experience or technological advancement when it decides to demonstrate its ultimate authority. Technological advances continue to offer hope for renewed search efforts and potential resolution. Satellite imagery analysis has improved dramatically with AI-assisted pattern recognition that can identify anomalies that human observers might miss. Ground-penetrating radar systems have become more sophisticated and portable. Drone technology has advanced to allow longer flights with better imaging capabilities. But each technological advance also highlights the limitations that persist in Death Valley's extreme environment. The desert's vast scale, complex geology, and harsh conditions continue to challenge even the most advanced search technologies. The same factors that may have contributed to Bruno's disappearance continue to complicate efforts to solve the mystery. What makes Bruno's case particularly haunting within the broader context of wilderness disappearances is how it stands apart from typical missing person statistics. Most wilderness disappearances eventually yield some form of evidence, equipment, clothing, or remains that provide clues about what happened and where. Bruno's case represents a statistical anomaly that challenges fundamental assumptions about how people vanish in wilderness areas. Geological surveys continue to reveal new aspects of Death Valley's complex underground structure, hidden caverns, unmarked crevices, and underground waterways that remain essentially inaccessible even with modern equipment. Each new discovery raises the possibility that Bruno's fate remains literally hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to reveal itself. Climate change has begun to alter Death Valley's environmental patterns in ways that could affect the preservation of evidence. Changing precipitation patterns, temperature fluctuations, and increased frequency of extreme weather events could potentially expose previously hidden evidence or could further complicate the preservation of clues that might still exist. Volunteer search groups and amateur investigators continue to explore areas that official searches might have missed or that have become accessible with changing conditions. Their efforts represent the outdoor community's refusal to accept that Bruno's fate will remain forever unknown, even as the chances of finding definitive answers continue to diminish with time. Bruno's four-book series, John and the Jesus Boat, has taken on new significance and poignancy in the context of his disappearance. His writing about faith, perseverance, and finding meaning in life's most challenging circumstances now serves as his final message to those who knew him and to the broader community that has been touched by his story. The books explore themes of spiritual journey, physical challenge, and the search for meaning that characterized Bruno's approach to both wilderness adventure and daily life. His writing reveals a man who understood that the greatest adventures often involve the greatest risks, and that the pursuit of meaning sometimes requires accepting uncertainty. The broader search and rescue community has embraced Bruno's case as a reminder of both the importance of their work and the limitations they face even with the best intentions and resources. Memorial services for missing hikers often include references to those who remain unfound, acknowledging that some mysteries persist despite humanity's best efforts to solve them. Bruno's family continues to advocate for renewed search efforts, technological applications, and sustained public awareness of their father's case. Their persistence demonstrates that the impact of an unexplained disappearance extends far beyond the initial search period and affects families and communities for years or even decades. The case has influenced legislation and policy discussions about wilderness safety, search and rescue funding, and the responsibilities of different agencies when hikers go missing in complex jurisdictional areas. Bruno's disappearance revealed gaps in coordination and response that have led to improved protocols and better resource allocation. Death Valley continues to attract adventurers who understand the risks, but feel compelled to explore its vast wilderness. Bruno's disappearance serves as both warning and inspiration, a reminder that the desert demands respect and careful preparation, but that it shouldn't be feared into submission by those who are properly prepared and experienced. Educational programs now include Bruno's case as an example of how quickly wilderness situations can become life-threatening, even for experienced hikers. His story is used to teach the importance of communication protocols, backup plans, and the acceptance of risk that comes with wilderness exploration. Comparison with other eventually solved disappearance cases reveals what makes Bruno's situation truly unique in the annals of wilderness mysteries. The completeness of his vanishing, the extent of the search efforts, the total absence of evidence, and the expertise of the missing person create a combination of factors that defies conventional explanation. Scientific studies of Death Valley's preservation environment suggest that evidence should exist somewhere in the vast landscape. The desert's dry conditions typically preserve organic materials for extended periods, and the search area's geology should have revealed traces of human presence. The continued absence of any evidence challenges these scientific expectations and adds another layer of mystery to an already inexplicable case. Informal memorial markers have appeared at various locations throughout Death Valley, placed by hikers who want to honor Bruno's memory and acknowledge the risks that all wilderness adventurers face. These markers serve as reminders that every venture into the wilderness carries inherent dangers that can't be completely eliminated by experience or preparation. Future technological advances may eventually provide the tools needed to solve Bruno's disappearance, but the passage of time makes resolution increasingly unlikely. Each year that passes without discovery makes it less likely that evidence will be found in a condition that provides definitive answers about what happened in Hunter Canyon. The mystery that began in Hunter Canyon continues to echo through Death Valley's silence, challenging our understanding of wilderness safety, human preparation, and the limits of what technology and determination can accomplish when confronted with nature's ultimate authority. Rolin Bruno walked into Death Valley's Hunter Canyon with decades of wilderness experience, meticulous preparation, and the simple expectation of joining his family for their annual Thanksgiving celebration. Instead, he became part of the desert's eternal silence, leaving behind a mystery that has confounded investigators, challenged search and rescue experts, and haunted everyone who has followed his story. No body has ever been found, no equipment has ever been recovered, no clues have ever emerged to explain what happened to a man who understood wilderness survival better than most people understand their own neighborhoods. Just an empty truck at the base of mountains that rise like monuments to the unknown, and a family that has spent 5 years searching for answers that may not exist. The massive search operation that followed Bruno's disappearance represents one of the most extensive and technologically advanced efforts in Death Valley's history. Helicopters, drones, ground teams, search dogs, thermal imaging, and dozens of trained professionals searched hundreds of square miles of some of the most challenging terrain in North America. The resources deployed were impressive, the expertise involved was world-class, and the results were absolutely nothing. In a world where technology can track our every movement, where satellites can identify objects from space, where search teams have equipment that can detect the faintest heat signatures, how does a 76-year-old man simply vanish without leaving behind even the walking sticks that he carried on every single hike? The answer might be buried somewhere in Death Valley's endless expanse, hidden in a location that has remained undiscovered despite years of searching. It might be concealed in an underground cavern that remains inaccessible to current technology. It might be preserved in a geological formation that won't reveal its secrets for decades or centuries. But the answer might also be that some questions don't have answers that human understanding can accept. Bruno's disappearance forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the limits of human preparation, the ultimate power of nature, and the possibility that some mysteries are meant to endure regardless of our technological capabilities or determination to solve them. The theories that have emerged to explain Bruno's disappearance, accidental falls, medical emergencies, weather exposure, disorientation, all have merit and all have problems. Each explanation accounts for some aspects of the case while failing to address others. The complete absence of evidence challenges every conventional theory about how people vanish in wilderness areas. Bruno's disappearance has changed how the outdoor community thinks about wilderness safety and risk acceptance. His story serves as both inspiration for those who continue to explore extreme environments and warning about the irreducible dangers that come with wilderness adventure. He represents the paradox of wilderness exploration. The more experienced and prepared you become, the more you understand how little control you actually have. His family continues to search for closure that may never come. They return to Death Valley repeatedly, explore new areas as they become accessible, and maintain hope that someday, somehow, they'll find the answers they need to process their grief and understand what happened to their father. Their persistence represents the human refusal to accept that some mysteries can't be solved. The outdoor community has rallied around Bruno's memory and his family's continued search efforts. His story has become a touchstone for discussions about wilderness safety, preparation, and the acceptance of risk. Hikers throughout the American West know his name and his story, and many carry his memory with them when they venture into extreme environments. Search and rescue professionals continue to study Bruno's case for insights that might improve their methods and increase their success rates in future operations. His disappearance revealed limitations in coordination, response times, and search technology that have led to improvements in protocols and equipment. But perhaps the most important aspect of Bruno's legacy is how his story reminds us that wilderness exploration involves more than just physical preparation and technical skills. It requires a spiritual acceptance of risk, an understanding that nature operates by rules that human beings can't fully comprehend or control, and a recognition that the pursuit of adventure sometimes comes with costs that can't be calculated in advance. Until that day comes when new evidence emerges or technology provides answers that have remained elusive, Rolin Bruno's story serves as a haunting reminder that nature keeps its secrets, and some mysteries are deeper than we dare to imagine. His disappearance represents the ultimate wilderness paradox. The more we know about survival and preparation, the more we realize how little we actually control when we venture into nature's most extreme environments. If this case has left you as unsettled as it has me, make sure you're subscribed to Last Seen Stories for more investigations into the cases that refuse to be solved. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover the next mystery that's been hiding in plain sight. And remember, in the wilderness, you're never truly alone. Sometimes that's exactly the problem. The story of Rolin Bruno continues to unfold, not through new discoveries or evidence, but through the impact his disappearance has had on everyone who has encountered his story. His legacy lives on in improved safety protocols, enhanced search techniques, and the collective memory of a community that refuses to forget those who vanish into the wilderness. In Death Valley's vast silence, Bruno's story echoes as a reminder that some mysteries transcend human understanding, that some questions may never have answers, and that the wilderness demands a humility that acknowledges our limitations even as we push against them. His disappearance stands as testimony to nature's ultimate authority and the profound mystery that continues to surround those who venture into its most extreme environments.